I'm Chief Officer of the TheFDF Centre for Independent Living. We support disabled people of all ages, pan-disability, across 6 counties in North Wales to live independently, that is, to live where they want, how they want, and with whom they want. I'm involved with other organisations, both across Wales and across the UK, and we're all hearing the same thing, that disabled people are being left out when it comes to considerations for the cost of living crisis. For instance, just the equipment they use. They can no longer afford the electricity. We got involved originally, chap in Wrexham, disabled man with 2 teenage children living in a stone cottage. Off-grid, couldn't afford to buy heating fuel. So him and his 2 kids were going to his sister's once a fortnight for a bath. They were living on microwave meals and they were going to bed early, 7 o'clock at night, wrapped up in all sorts of blankets because the house was so cold. I was only listening yesterday to BBC News, and they said even with the new cap on energy prices going forward, families are only going to be £26 a year better off. That is ridiculous. The chap I've just mentioned with the oil, the response was, there's an organisation that hands out grants of £200. The minimum amount of oil that man could have delivered has gone up from just over £300 to over £1,200. £200 won't even cut it. Nobody will deliver it for the £200. Food, the cost of food has gone up enormously, especially for children who are on special diets or have to eat certain foods. And these food handouts of food parcels, soggy pasta, soggy rice, giving tins of food to people who have no ability to actually open a tin. They don't have the strength in their hands to open tins. And it's just not appropriate. It would be far better for the government to address the whole issue of supermarkets. Supermarkets, we're all encouraged to put a tin in that basket at the side, so you go into the supermarket, pay the high price, and then put that tin you've paid to that supermarket in that basket to feed the people who can't afford to eat in their supermarket. Looking at the cost of children's clothes, particularly for school uniforms, the fact that we've now got kids, not only disabled children, but all children who are wearing second-hand school uniforms, living off handouts of free school meals. Free school meals when I was a kid were not heard of. And now it's become the norm that people cannot feed their children during the school holidays because of food poverty without free school meals. And we're allegedly one of the richest countries, and yet we are actually treating our children appallingly. We provide advice, information, advocacy on all issues to do with disability. So we actually do benefit checks, full benefit checks, and we are able to secure thousands of pounds in previously unclaimed benefits for people who didn't know those benefits were available. So pension credit, so attendance allowance, carers allowance. When somebody's referred to us from anywhere, self-referral, medical referral, social services, local authorities refer to us, first thing we do is a benefit check to make sure they're getting what they're entitled to. And then we ask them, the subject matter grows. So it might be they're not able to warm their home. So we speak to other people who can provide grants. We don't do food parcels for the reasons I've said, because quite often we feel that some of that stuff's thrown away because it's not suitable. We don't encourage people particularly, they can if they want, but to go to warm hubs because they're going out in the freezing cold, leaving their warm home, going in the freezing cold during the winter months to a warm hub where they're treated, you can sit there and drink cups of tea and eat biscuits, make jigsaws, and then you go back to your freezing cold house, because if you haven't turned the heating off, there's actually no point in going. You go back to your freezing cold house and you, during the day, are sharing your germs with everybody else in that warm hub. And also, it's an ideal opportunity for slips, trips and falls on frozen pavements. And you're standing in the rain waiting for a bus that may or may not turn up. It is just ill thought out vanity politics by a government who actually haven't got a clue what they're doing. The people who are making the decisions don't have the lived experience. So I go to many government meetings and sit around with people on 80, 90, 100k salaries, and in fact wouldn't have a clue what it was like to sit in a cold office. Imagine what it's like, you're sitting in the Senate or in a warm local authority office, all tucked up, making decisions about people. I remember many years ago when personal independent payments first came out. I sat in a local authority meeting and suddenly there were lots and lots of things that had to be filled in for employment support online. You fill your form in, you have your journal, you do it all online. I said, what happens if you haven't got a laptop? Oh, you can go to the library. The local authority we're sitting in actually closed all the libraries that year. And how do you get to this library? Oh, you can go on the bus. Public transport in North Wales is horrendous. So they're sitting there in their ivory towers making these decisions, not understanding what it's like in the real world. I'm fortunate I've never been short of money for a long time. But to actually not know whether you've got enough money to feed your kids at the end of the day is no way to live. One of the other situations that we're dealing with mostly at the moment is mental health. We had the pandemic that we're still blaming for anything and everything. We had the cost of living crisis. These families have lived like this for 3 or 4 years now. They cannot continue living in this state where they depend on handouts. Oh, if you're lucky, you'll get £75 or whatever it is, £76 this month. And if you're lucky, you might get £150. I actually struggle to understand where all these handouts are coming from and what that means. What about dignity and respect for these people? Because although we see advertised, oh, there's all these jobs. No, there's not. I have a granddaughter who was a care worker prior to COVID. 35 applications she put in for care work and didn't even receive an acknowledgement of any of them, because those jobs are only there in the imagination of government officials, because the local authority, the care homes, cannot afford to actually employ the staff. What about, you've got me on a roll now. What about people who live on their own, have a fall? I'll give you a scenario. 94-year-old man, living on his own. He happened to have his family there. 12 hours he waited for an ambulance in this very county. If he'd been living on his own, rather than his daughter and his wife with him, he falls out of that shower, slips, ends up lying in a pool of water, probably 24 hours before somebody found him. I was actually told of a situation in Wrexham not very long ago where somebody had tied up the emergency cord in a toilet and somebody fell, and it was 48 hours before they found him, till somebody noticed that that door was still locked. and it was 48 hours later, that disabled person was lying on the floor. We need to make the environment more accessible to anybody with any disability. But there is a saying that we use: disabled people or their carers, like the parents, are accepted to serve on boards or to be consulted, but not expected to make a contribution. So you tick a box, we have a wheelchair user, or we have the parents of somebody with, I don't know, you know rare conditions better than I do. But yeah, we'll tick that box. Mrs. Jones will come and sit here. But you know, she's only Mrs. Jones, she doesn't know. And I think what we need to do is something that we didn't do during the pandemic. We locked out disabled people. When all those food parcels came hurtling out of the world and his wife, everybody wanted to be a volunteer. I also said, a volunteer is for life, not just for COVID. Come the September 2020, they all disappeared. Their furlough finished and they all went. And all those disabled people were left, still without the support they needed, because, oh, we've gone back to work. I actually remember saying to a particular organisation in this county, could they supply some food parcels for a particular gentleman? But this gentleman, serious mental health, physical disabilities, had been a very senior manager in a national organisation until his breakdown. But he'd become dependent on alcohol during his breakdown. And I said, this guy might ask you to bring him a bottle of vodka. Oh, we're not giving the likes of him alcohol or food. He died 3 months later, that man, because he had a massive seizure because he was alcohol dependent, didn't have the alcohol, had a seizure and died. The other thing that we need to be is non-judgmental, because there are too many people out there who say, you know, benefits grounders. I read it all the time, benefits grounders, they're living off the state, they want something for nothing, there is no reason why they can't look after themselves. And also accepting that not everybody is digitally included or able to get in a car and go out and about, go and do their shopping. Gentleman we know from Gwyneth, his wife, he gave up another senior job in a power station. He gave up his job to care for his wife. Once a month he used to take her out for a meal. That was a big treat. And he said, I can't even do that now because I can't afford the meal and I can't afford the petrol to get there. And now he said, my wife never goes over the doorstep. So it's that lack of understanding of how the cost of living has really hit home to the people who had nothing to start with, because you can't draw water from a well that's dry. And these people were already living in abject poverty. Some of them live okay. So they're not all disabled people are poor, but many of them are. And many of them don't know where to turn to for help.